it doesn't seem like work because this is what I wanted to do. So the way I tell people, I said, this is something that God has been preparing me to do my entire life. And he said, before I have you do this, I know you have talents in the medical field and I need you out there to do this. And then I did that and said, okay, I've done that. And now is the time for me to go be a clothing designer.
Welcome to Second Act Stories. Every 2 weeks, we take a close look at a courageous individual pursuing a more rewarding life in a second act. I'm your host, Andy Levine.
And I'm Scott Merritt, Andy's co-host today. So Andy, tell us a little bit about Dr. Vanessa Gavin-Headen.
Yeah, this is a great interview. So one of the key takeaways from our podcast has been, for inspiration, look back to your childhood. And that's really the case for today's episode. Dr. Vanessa loved fashion growing up. She always wanted to be a fashion designer, but she took a different path and she opted to work as a family physician for 25 years. But when she prepared for retirement, she decided it was time to reignite that fashion dream. And today at age 58, she is the owner of Valmasi, a company that manufactures medical scrubs for, as she likes to put it, curvy women.
So, if I understand correctly, you spoke to an actual doctor.
That's right, yes.
Who had a passion for fashion.
That's correct, yes.
And now that's become her second act. I love it. Let's hear Dr. Vanessa Gavin-Headen's second act story.
So I want to start at the beginning. Just tell me a little about growing up, family life, that kind of thing. Where did you grow up?
I was raised mostly in Sacramento, California.
Okay.
My parents were from New Orleans, but my dad got a job in California, so I came out to California when I was 7. And Sacramento, yes, it's the capital of California, but it wasn't much going on in Sacramento in the 70s.
So you're growing up in Sacramento.
Yes,
Early on, I gather you had an interest in fashion design and sewing. Talk
I
a little
did.
about that and how that developed.
Yes. When I was 8 years old, my mom taught me how to sew. And she taught both me and my sister. And I took to it. My sister decided she liked to cook, and I liked to sew, so it worked out nicely. And I sewed my clothes in high school. I sewed some clothes in college. I just enjoyed it. And I think as my teenage years, looking around at fashion, looking at colors and how things fit, I decided, I really want to do this and make this my career. I have no idea why. I just knew that I really enjoyed it. I was making my own stuff. I usually went with patterns that I bought from the store, and if I change them a little bit or make something different on it, that's what I was doing. You're learning at that time, trying to figure out what fabrics work, what colors work, how they come together. And it was all experimentation, but I really enjoyed it.
Okay. I want to switch gears to your professional education and training, and
Hmm.
you eventually find your way to medical school.
Yes.
Tell us about that path and how you got there.
In undergraduate, I was a biology major. And at UC Irvine, everybody wanted to be in med school. That was just the thing. And then I went into a presentation on public health, and I said, oh, this is great. I love this. And I decided to get my master's in public health from UCLA in epidemiology, which is the study of diseases and how they spread. So if you think back in the early 80s, it was epidemiologists who came and said, this is how AIDS was transmitted. They put all those
That's right.
pieces together. So that's what I did. And I worked at the LA County STD program. But while I was going through the program, I met a physician, and she was coming back to get her master's in public health. And we became friends. She was my mentor. And she was a Black physician, family physician. She told me what she did, and I was able to ask her questions. That was a turning point right there. Graduated from UCLA with a master's in public health. I worked a year for the LA County SD program, and then I went back to UCLA for medical school.
Gotcha, gotcha. So you begin practicing medicine in, I have 1998. Does that sound about right?
That is right. I really enjoyed being a family practice doctor. I was working in Long Beach, California, so it's city in LA County, and I enjoyed it because I believe that people should understand what's going on with their bodies. I I took the extra time to explain things to people so they understood why I was prescribing something or why I was not prescribing something.
And what sort of population were you serving? This was in Los Angeles?
Yes, and it's because it was a Long Beach, pretty mixed population, and people had insurance. There was a small group that had Medi-Cal, so they were underinsured. But it was very mixed. It was very mixed. All ranges of ethnicities. Um, I even had to bone up a little bit on some Spanish.
Okay, okay, good.
Yeah, so it was a wide range, and I enjoyed being a physician. I think I enjoyed the contact with people. I liked being part of their lives. I liked helping them solve problems and being their coach or being a cheerleader. Yes, you did it. You got your diabetes under control. Yes, you have lost 15 pounds. Yes, whatever it is, you stopped drinking. That I enjoyed in their wins, and unfortunately, I had to share in the losses too. But it was a very rewarding career, and I got a lot of feedback. My patients really enjoyed having me as their physician.
During this period, was there still an interest in fashion? Are you still sewing? Are you still doing anything to feed that interest?
Yes, there was an interest in sewing and being a fashion designer when I was in public health. Even when I was getting my master's degree, I still was thinking, how am I going to get to be a clothing designer by doing this master's degree? But there was a time once you start working, you start having kids, and you just get entrenched in that. And I wasn't sewing for a long time, and I got to a point where I said, well, what is missing? What is going on? And I realized when you go through medical training, you're so into medicine that you forget some of the other things that you used to like to do. And I realized that I forgot who Vanessa is. And that's when I started sewing again.
So, when did the idea of starting your own company first start to emerge?
I have to say, the idea of actually sewing and doing something came probably in my mid 40s. And I said, when I retire, I want to do something. I didn't know how big this company would be, if it would be on small scale or large. But it really started when my girlfriend, who is a lawyer, she started her own clothing design, and she has her own fashion brand, and we talked years about doing it. So she started hers in 2017, and she and her daughter are doing theirs, and she's like, yeah, you could do it. And we watched her grow and grow and grow, and then their brand has gotten out there and really has flourished. So I said, I can do this. And it was around COVID when people started wearing scrubs again in the office, because I hadn't worn scrubs since residency. And as I was wearing scrubs and other people wearing scrubs, I was looking at how they're fitting. I hadn't bought scrubs in years. So they were baggy and loose, and I didn't like them. So when I started buying some of the more stylish scrubs, I noticed that I didn't have enough room in the butt area. So when I sat down, I felt like my waistband wanted to slide down a little bit. And then I started asking around some of my friends if they were noticing things like that. And some of the women who were top heavy were noticing that I feel constricted when I wear these scrubs. And that's when the idea came. I said, so I want to start my own clothing company. People are complaining about scrubs. And
I
all
know
my
about
life,
this.
yes, all my life, I've had issues with wearing things and they don't fit around my butt, or I have to buy bigger and they don't fit at the waist.
I think of medical scrubs. Are these like kind of things that the design of it has not changed in like 100 years or something like that?
The design hadn't changed for a very long time, but I'd say maybe 10 to 15 years ago, you see more fashion brands coming out with stylish looking scrubs. And even though you can have more choices now, there's still pockets of people who still have complaints about fit. There's always going to be people who don't fit the quote unquote norm because standard sizes are meant for standard size people. So there are always little things that you can change for a niche population.
How did you go about exploring? I mean, how do you, go from being a doctor and sewing on the side to figuring out a manufacturing process?
Yes. I found an organization called the Women's Business Center, and they help women and men. It's not just for women to explore and become entrepreneurs. And they offered a webinar series on fashion design. So at night, I was doing the webinars to learn how to start your own fashion brand, how to run a business, how to do this, how to market, all these things. And they would offer them for free for anyone who wanted to start their own small business. And that's what I was doing at night.
And have you gone sort of the contract manufacturing route in terms of how to produce your product?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Because as they go through and teach you things, they teach you how to find manufacturers, and you find other mentors and coaches, and they'll give you lists of manufacturers. And a lot of it was just talking to people, asking around, and the current manufacturer I have ended up being the cousin of a friend of someone that I work with,
The name of the company is Valmasi. Am I
Valmasi.
saying that correctly?
Yes, you are.
Okay. And I know there's a story behind the meaning of it. So tell our listeners about that.
So Almasi without the V is diamond in Swahili.
Okay.
And I wanted something that would show elegance and something being special to people who are buying it. And I put the V in front because of my name, of course.
What is it like, after being in medicine for 25 years?
Mhm.
I'd imagine some of it is fairly repetitive and doing
Mhm.
the same things each day, to doing something completely different in terms of, coming up with designs and then finding a contract manufacturer, building a website, starting up a company. I mean, this is a pretty big shift.
It is. And I guess I didn't think about it like that because this is something I've always wanted to do. This was the dream. And uh yeah, finding fabric and you're right, finding manufacturer, all these things, going through fitting changes and models. I didn't think about it being so big because this is what I've been working for all my life. All my life. And it doesn't seem like work because this is what I wanted to do. So the way I tell people, I said, this is something that God has been preparing me to do my entire life. And he said, before I have you do this, I know you have talents in the medical field and I need you out there to do this. And then I did that and said, okay, I've done that. And now is the time for me to go be a clothing designer.
Tell us about the product and what makes it different from other offerings that are out there.
So what I did when I made the patterns and put the idea together, I wanted to have a regular size chart that everyone's familiar with, but then also have a curvy size chart. And then the curvy size chart has little extra room at the bust line for women who are top heavy, and a little extra room at the hips and the buttocks so that if you need extra room around the hips, you have that. If you don't need that extra room, then you would just buy the regular size and you can mix and match for top and bottom, however you see fit.
And the fabric that you ended up using, tell me
So
about
the
that.
fabric, yeah, fabric is graphene polyester. So graphene is a newer technology. You see it in some athletic wear, makes it more durable. more um, antimicrobial, more breathable,
Okay.
and helps with insulation.
You launched your company, I believe, in August of 2024?
It was November of
November.
2020.
Okay.
Yeah, 2024. Yes.
Okay. What has been the early response from people so far?
Well, so far, people have purchased and they like the product. They like the feel of the fabric. They like the way it looks. I'd have to say because the fabric's a little more expensive, it looks different than the regular scrubs fabric. So sometimes you look at scrubs, it look like pajamas. I
Okay. Yep.
didn't want the pajama look. So I'd say that you can wear the scrubs, and if you were leaving clinic and you have to go to a meeting, if you were still wearing the scrubs, you wouldn't feel like you're wearing scrubs.
And just give us an idea of what the product sells for. How much does it cost?
So right now, the tops are $60
Okay.
and the pants are 72.
Okay.
And initially people say, wow, look at your price point. I said, yes, but I manufacture here in LA County. So when you
Okay.
manufacture in the United States, it will cost more. And people have to understand if you're buying something that's made overseas, it's cheaper because of the labor laws that they don't have that we have in the United States.
We've talked about this new phase of your life, and just to maybe finish up on your medical career,
Mhm.
you've retired from full time being a full time doctor, but you're doing some part time work.
Right. Yes. I retired from full-time daily practice and I still go back and I work some shifts here and there just to keep the skills and show my face. So every once in a while I see one of my old patients and they're happy to see me. But I still enjoy being a physician. It's just that in order to launch this new product, there's no way I could carry a full load and do this. It would take me too long to get it done.
What do you hope this company becomes? What would you like to see happen in the next 3 to 5 years, let's say?
You know, in the next, I'd say the next 5 years, I'd like to see it to be a company that becomes a name that people know, at least in the healthcare world for scrubs. Oh yeah, Curvy scrubs. Yeah, I know this company. This is look at Valmasi. They're made for scrubs for curvy women, and something that will roll off someone else's tongue. They'll say, "Oh yeah."
What's your biggest challenge right now as the owner of a new startup?
Doing all the jobs
Okay.
because it's me. I do all the jobs. I do the marketing. I make the phone calls and the emails, and I do everything. That's probably the hardest part. And because I do all the jobs, I don't know how to do all the jobs. So I'm
Hmm.
learning as I go.
You didn't
Yes.
mention the finance, but that falls on your plate as well, I assume.
Yes, it does. Oh, it does. So I mean, I can say that I don't owe anybody. I don't have any loans.
Okay, that's great.
And yeah, so this is because I did it this way. I knew all along the money I'm making, I, I'm going to have this set aside for my business.
What advice would you give to people, our listeners, who are maybe thinking about a major change like this, perhaps starting their own company in their 50s? What,
Right.
what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think as long as you either have the finances or you're comfortable with going negative initially and not ending up losing your house and all these other things that can happen, I think you should go for it. If you decide that you can't leave your job, then just know that you're working and it's going to take a while, but it's okay. Plan it out and decide I'm going to work and I'm going to work on my business. Whichever path you need to do, I think if this is something that you want to do, you feel you need to do, and you don't want to live with regret, then you should do it.
Usually people like to talk about their successes, but we learn a lot from
Oh,
mistakes. If you had to share, I don't know, for our audience, maybe an example of one mistake you made
mhm.
in starting your company, does one thing stick out that
The one thing that sticks out, I think you should get a trademark attorney.
okay, okay.
Absolutely. I didn't want to pay the money. I said, oh, I'm just going to do this. So Valmasi is not my first name, it's my second name. And I said, yeah, I can do this. And I went to file it through LegalZoom. I just gave
Okay.
him and said, here, file this. And that was maybe a year and a half of headache. And my first name didn't go through. So I had to change the name after getting a cease and desist from a major company who will be
Okay.
nameless. And the lawyer said, you cannot use this name. And I said, okay,
Okay. Time for a new name.
time for a new name. I had to
Okay.
reshift and change and remove all my previous posts with the name and everything.
Anything I've neglected to ask you that you think is important in understanding your second act?
Only thing I can say really is that I feel really grateful and blessed that I was able to have two things in my life that I can put all of my energy in. Put all of my energy into medicine. Now I'm putting all of my energy into my dream of being a clothing designer. And I tell people that this is this is my dream, and if it doesn't work out or if it's a huge success, either way I'm happy because I was able to do what I've always wanted to do.
Well, Andy, it's no surprise you found another exceptional story, another great interview. Dr. Vanessa is so interesting. And of course, I have a couple of questions.
Let's hear them. I'm ready.
Okay. So the first thing that occurred to me is that when most people think of fashion, they think of the runways in Paris and New York and the big fashion designers and houses. But this is far more practical fashion or even purposeful fashion, right? So talk a little bit about the role of purpose in Vanessa's life.
Yeah, I mean, she was a doctor for 25 years. What we saw as the COVID crisis hit is more and more people wearing scrubs so they could dump their clothes at the end of their shift and go home. And what she saw was that, the clothes weren't fitting very well. And so she wanted to correct that. She always had an interest in fashion. So she designed for something that she knew, the medical profession. And she's been very successful in creating this company and creating a new design for medical scrubs.
Who would have thought medical scrubs would be ready for their reinvention? Now, speaking of reinventions, a lot of people who we've spoken to have taken on their own personal reinvention by looking back at their childhood. And this is exactly where Dr. Vanessa falls, right? So you did a TED Talk last year sometime.
Yep.
And you included some stats about the people who looked back to their childhood for inspiration. Can you refresh everybody's memory on what those stats were?
Yeah, sure. When we looked at the podcasts that we have done, 30% of the people we've interviewed have gone back to something that they really enjoyed in childhood. And it might be acting, it might be cooking, it might be writing. In Vanessa's case, it is fashion. And this is a great example, but the number is 30%, which is a huge number.
Amazing. Man, those childhood dreams never do go away, do they?
Apparently not.
One final question. Where can everybody go to learn more about Dr. Vanessa and Valmasi?
You can go to the Valmasi website. It's at valmasi.com. If you like to wear medical scrubs for work, or perhaps you just like them lounging around the home, you'll find some great options here, some really good stuff to purchase.
And what if I'm not in the medical field?
Well, if you just like to pretend you're a doctor or pretend you're a nurse, whatever it might be, you're welcome to purchase these for yourself.
Oh, man, my mother will be so proud when she sees me wearing scrubs.
Finally, yes, finally.
Finally give her something to be proud of. Well, on that note, we hope you'll follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn, and Substack and Instagram. We're kind of everywhere. We also really want you to leave us a good review. Please go through whatever channel you're listening through and leave us a review. 5 stars is great. That's what we want. And we hope you'll share us with your family and friends. That's how we grow.
We hope you'll keep listening. There are more second act stories just around the corner.